Time for team preview number 8. It's time for the Houston Outlaws. In the lead up to the Overwatch League season for 2021, Houston Outlaws have made quite a few changes. I think we can say that, but then again, that's the case for a lot of teams in the Overwatch League this season. So it's nothing too unusual to be looking at a lot of roster movements. But Houston Outlaws, one of our inaugural teams, have always been, well, consistent. I suppose we can say consistent, but consistently middle to bottom half of the league. So is that a good consistent? I mean, Houston Outlaws was 7th in the inaugural season. They actually had a positive record, which was the only time they achieved a positive record in their season. The next 2 seasons, they would finished 16th both times. But Houston, they're a difficult team, aren't they? Because sometimes they show flashes of good play and then it just kind of disappears into nothingness. And we just get mediocre Houston. But this year, they are aiming to turn that around. And it's going to be interesting to see how this team works out. I say interesting way too much in these videos. Probably because it's going to be a very interesting season. There you go, I said it again. Anyway, the Houston Outlaws have let go of quite a few of their players. And we're going to start off with, first of all, a lot of the, what I suppose we could call dead wood leaving the Houston Outlaws. So Spree left back in July. Raucus left back in August and retired. But now we've seen the rest of the older guard of the Houston Outlaws leave. So Muma is now gone. He went to Dark Mode NA as a coach, actually. And Linkser has also gone. He's moving over to the Vancouver Titans. Blase is out, although Blase now finds himself at the London Spitfire. This is when it starts to hurt for the Houston Outlaws because Jexer is out. He goes over to the rivals Dallas Fuel. He also goes to the Dallas Fuel alongside Rappel. So that's probably a sting in the tail for the Houston Outlaws. We do see Meko leaving the Houston Outlaws though. That's an interesting one because I thought Meko would be one of the players they would want to hold on to. Meko has not found a team in the Overwatch League, despite his long-standing time at the New York Excelsior previously. So that's a bit of an unfortunate turn of events for him. And then we see also Boink leaving. Boink, not too much of a surprise either. Again, part of the old guard of the Houston Outlaws. It's all moving on. Houston Outlaws, we're looking at Generation 2 Houston Outlaws this season. And I think it's something that's needed to happen. I think Houston Outlaws have needed an overhaul. And also with that, they've decided to get rid of Dream and Hureg, who were their 2 assistant coaches. So this is finally the big clear out that Houston Outlaws needed. And I think a lot of people will welcome it. So the coaching has slightly changed. So they have 2 coaches right now. They are both co-head coaches. It's Harsher staying in his role alongside Junkbuck. Junkbuck is coming in from the San Francisco Shock, having worked alongside, yes, Krusty. Quite a few of those San Francisco Shock coaches have moved on to head coach or co-head coach roles across the Overwatch League. It's going to be something to definitely keep an eye on during the season with, Junkbuck here. You've got Arachne over at the Guangzhou Charge as well, taking up that head coach role. So it's going to be a very insightful season to see if it was really Krusty or whether there was a power behind the throne at the San Francisco Shock that can go on and impact these teams elsewhere in a really positive manner. Anyway, that's the coaching staff for the San Francisco Shock. They have also recruited none other than Jake. He is taking on a role as Director of Talent Development alongside another role we will be talking about in a minute. Anyway, we're going to move on to their roster now. Different looking Houston Outlaws, but there are still some traits of the old. So, the 2 players that are retained from last season's Houston is Dante, so the DPS player, and then Hydration, who was actually a tank player last season. He's now going back to his more traditional DPS role, which I think we all want to see that, don't we? Hydration is probably one of the most flexible players in terms of different roles he can play in the league. It's very useful to have him on board. It'll be interesting to see how much use they make out of him this season. It's going to be interesting to see how they balance a lot of these players, considering, should we say, the flooded certain role that the Houston Outlaws have this season. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see, and I think these are 2 good retains anyway. First of all, coming in though, we have Crimzo. This is weird, isn't it? So you lose Jexer and Rappel to Dallas Fuel, and you yoink Crimzo. That's not exactly the best of trades, I'm not gonna lie. Of course, Dallas Fuel had a lure this season, you know. They've got a lot of nice things to go to, Rush and a bunch of Korean players that I'm sure Jackson Rappel really wanted to go back to with one of the Element Mystic days. But it's still rough for the Outlaws to lose, especially someone like Jexa, who looked really good for the Outlaws last season at times. It's rough to lose him. And you've replaced him with, first of all, Crimzo. I mean, Crimzo's not a bad player, but he's also not a fantastic player either. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that happens. But I don't think it's the worst. Don't get me wrong, but I think there's a lot better. So we'll have to see how that one pans out. Next up, we have the new DPS player in town for the Houston Outlaws, Hitscan Happy, coming in from the Guangzhou Charge. This is a good pickup. Happy is a great Hitscan player. He's not been at the biggest of teams, but Guangzhou Charge had a very good placing last year, and Happy has big pop-off potential. He's not the greatest of greatest Hitscan players in the league, but he is a good Hitscan player, and certainly something that I think is going to be key for the Houston Outlaws this season. He's going to be one of the best parts of this DPS line that the Houston Outlaws have got, that's for sure, and he's probably going to be one of the best players that the Houston Outlaws have got. But how much is that saying? Like, was Happy the best player on Guangzhou Charge last season? No. So, Guangzhou Charge ended up finishing, I believe, 6th last season. Houston Outlaws, I mean, this may get you like a 10th place finish, but is it going to get you any further? Happy's not going to carry you to the upper echelons of the league, I can tell you that now. And so, he's going to need backup alongside him. Then we come on to the new tank line of the Houston Outlaws, the first time they've had a proper entirely new tank line, and got rid of Muma. Yes, Muma has gone. In come Piggy and Jangu. So, Piggy comes in. He is going to be the off-tank player for the Houston Outlaws, previously at Talon Esports. Talon Esports were in the Pacific region before that was disbanded. Talon Esports dominated that Pacific region. They then moved over to Korea. And in Korea, they actually did surprisingly well. A lot of people didn't think that Talon Esports were going to do all that well in Korea, but they actually turned up and really did quite well. Piggy was part of that transition, and so he does have a good history, and he also has a win in China as well, with Huya back in the day, which was the academy team of the Chengdu Hunters. So he has actually quite a few championships in his pocket in the tier 2 scene, which is actually very good. He's partnered with the main tank Jangu, and Jangu was his partner at Talon Esports last year in Korea. Now, Jangu wasn't part of the transition of Talon Esports into Korea. He was only part of Talon Esports when they were in Korea. So, this means he doesn't come with quite the prestige that Piggy does. Jangu was at GC Busan Wave before being at Talon Esports, and GC Busan Wave, they weren't great. Yeah, I mean, they weren't great. And the only title, the first place that I can see that he has to his name, going back to 2018, was an open division title with GC Busan Wave, which is okay, I guess. Like, for an Overwatch League level player, it's okay. I mean, 3rd to 4th place finish in Season 2 of Korea, though. That is very good. From 2020. That is very good. They lost to Runaway, so we cannot take that away from him, but it's definitely Piggy that comes in with the bigger rep, should we say, compared to Jangu. Will this be a really, really good tank line? I somehow doubt it. But it will be a very serviceable tank line, I think. And it's not going to be up there with your big tank lines in the league. And when we look at the big tank lines in the league this year, we're talking at Smurf Choi Hyobin. We're talking like Muse and Space, maybe. We're talking maybe Fearless and Hanbin. Maybe the other tank duos in the league, you know, you got Mag and Fury as well, the Washington Justice. So you've got a lot of pretty stacked tank lines, right? This is not going to compete with them. Question is, can it outdo the tanks of Atlanta, let's say? Can it outdo Hadi and Mulfig at the London Spitfire? Can it make sure that it outdoes Dan and Elivote at Paris Eternal? And places like that. These are the people that have to be beaten for the Houston Outlaws to achieve that middle of the league or above finish. That's where they need to be at. And above that, obviously, if they can get there. But this is the teams they need to be beating consistently if they want to get to where they want to be, which is starting to be talked about. Can they start challenging the upper parts of the league? And to do that, you have to regularly beat the teams like London, like Paris, like Vancouver. And this is something Houston Outlaws have struggled with in the past. And it'll be interesting to see if they can actually do that this season. It'll be a stable tank line, but it won't be a massively fantastic, oh my god, tank line in my opinion. Then we come along to yet more DPS players. KSF this time then. So KSF is coming in from what was the Los Angeles Valiant. They've got a roster. The Immortals Valiant have got a roster, and we're going to laugh at it when they come around in this series. Oh boy. Anyway, let's not get off topic. KSF, he's a flex DPS player. He can play hit scan, he can play projectile. KSF was at the Valiant last season. KSF was okay. But he was certainly the weaker of the DPS players. When we put him alongside KSP, or now known as Kai, and then we put him alongside Shax, you start to see, oh, okay, he was okay. He was okay, but he was only okay. He wasn't this god tier player. And so, when you compare KSF and Hydration, you start to question, well, which one actually plays here? And then you got Dante as well. And then you got this player coming up. Yes, it's Jake. He's out of retirement and he's playing for the Houston Outlaws in the active squad again. So, yes, in total, the Houston Outlaws have 5 DPS players. Jake, KSF, Happy, Hydration, and Dante. This is interesting. Quite a lot of DPS players. What are they going to do with them all? That's the question, isn't it? Dante is going to play a pivotal role, so is Happy. The flex is going to have to be decided between KSF and Hydration. What quite Jake does, I don't know, unless there's a Junkrat meta. I'm not expecting Jake to feature much for this Houston Outlaws squad. I mean, I don't know why he would feature, apart from, if they decide to play Junkrat for some reason. Or maybe Soldier 76. But, I don't see that. I mean, that's very, very isolated, unique use cases. And I still don't know why you wouldn't use one of the other DPS players you have on those roles apart from perhaps the Junkrat. So, yeah, I think Jake is just a bit of a backup sort of person that's there if you need him. I think Jake is definitely the weakest out of all of these. Maybe. That might be a hot take, but... And I might get roasted for that one, but yeah, I think that's kind of where it is, isn't it? It'd be interesting to see who plays more time on the flex DPS role. I mean, you've got Dante, obviously, and Dante is incredibly flexible. So it wouldn't surprise me if the main starting DPS for the Houston Outlaws were Dante and Happy. But there is still a lot of depth and a lot of, possible combinations of these. I do think Houston Outlaws are very well equipped for whatever DPS meta there is, however. I do think that is something that they've succeeded well with in this sort of roster iteration, and it's something they've struggled with in the past. We all remember the days in the inaugural season where they didn't have a Tracer player. So yeah, that's something else. But we move on to our last one, our last signing for the Houston Outlaws. This is the main support, and this is the interesting one. So this is Jubi. Jubi comes in from HU Storm, which is a collegiate team. Yeah, he's the first ever Overwatch League player to be directly signed from a collegiate Overwatch team. Mamma mia. The story with Jubi is that he's not just a collegiate player. He's had experience in contenders with Simplicity, Wavecheck, Triumph, Saints, Second Wind. There is experience in Tier 2 there. However, he was that good in Tier 2 that he dropped down to collegiate Overwatch. Which is kind of weird. If you've got potential, and you've had plenty of teams, which he has, to demonstrate his potential going all the way back to 2019... He's still only 17, so he's still not eligible yet. He'll be eligible just before the season starts on April the 4th. But If he's had so many opportunities to prove his worth in Tier 2, why was he not still in Tier 2? That's the question. Now, there could be a lot of circumstances, right? It could have been school, it could have been parenting, housing, it could have been anything, right? Tier 2 doesn't tend to pay all that well, so you're not probably going to be setting up a place of your own, especially not at that age, because he's not he's not legal age. Or in some countries, he's not legal age. Anyway, I don't know the complete, rules in America where he lives anyway. But there could be a lot of reasons for it, but it does seem very odd that he did not manage to stay in Tier 2. And this could be a god tier find from Houston Outlaws and Junkbuck and Harsha. Or it could be we ran out of money. But then again, if they run out of money, Jubi will most likely be on the minimum level contract for the Overwatch League, which is 50k a year, right? There are plenty of players, the Immortals Valiant have just demonstrated this. There are plenty of players that will snap a hand off for 50k a year in the Tier 2 scene. What you can name some of them. A lot of and I will stand up for the Houston Outlaws in the fact that a lot of the American main supports in Tier 2 scene are below the age of Overwatch League eligibility. And so it does kind of make that difficult to sign them. However, they do have Happy, Piggy and Django, which means they could have gone down the route of getting a non-American support player, main support player, which there are plenty of. Then you've got the thing of, there is one, and this is a hot take. This is a very spicy take. But it would have been a very interesting move for a lot of reasons. They could have signed Aspen. Aspen, she was very able to keep herself in the Tier 2 scene through Contenders, Trials and Contenders. So she has now taken a break though. But I'm wondering if the Houston Outlaws approached her and she didn't want it or whatever, or maybe she couldn't relocate, whatever the case is. But she managed to maintain her Tier 2 identity. Jubi didn't. They would have wanted the same contract, the same amount of money. So why not? Just seems weird. So the Houston Outlaws definitely must see something in Jubi. I don't know whether this is something that their brand new director of talent development, Jake, has seen. I don't know whether this is something that Harsha and Junkbuck has seen. He might have just popped off in tryouts and they were like, let's go for it. But it is a massive gamble. If Jubi fails, they've got nothing else. No backup, no main support to replace him. If he is an extreme weak link in this Houston Outlaws team, this Houston Outlaws team will fail. And if he is the weak link that he could be, then this Houston Outlaws support line could end up being one of the worst support lines in the league. Which is kind of tragic when you can look at their tank line, which would probably keep up with the middle of the league. And then when you look at their DPS line, which can challenge. Like, I'm not going to say it's going to be one of the best, it's one of the most diverse DPS lines, but it's not going to challenge at the higher echelons of the league. So it'll be very, very sad if the support line of the Houston Outlaws lets the whole thing down. So Jubi is a very big question mark. Very big question mark. And I feel like, in some respects, if it was a rush to find someone, have Houston Outlaws not overinvested in their DPS? This is a year in which, a lot of teams are slimming down, unless they've got a lot of money. So MVS have got a lot of money, so they've invested in Dallas Fuel. San Francisco Shock NRG, they've got a lot of money because they just keep winning things. And Philadelphia Fusion as well with Comcast. So there's a lot of opportunities there, right? But a lot of teams are also slimming down. We're seeing fairly slim rosters, 7-man rosters, 8-man rosters. In an 8-man roster, well, 9-man roster because Jubi doesn't count in the 8. In a 9-man roster, 5 of those players are DPS players. That doesn't seem very balanced from the Outlaws, and that's worrying. I think they are going down a route of making sure that their team does not change too much in terms of the very, very, very solid parts of the tanks and the supports. but it's worrying that you're relying on someone with so little experience, someone that drops straight down to collegiate, someone so young. It's worrying. It's worrying. That's all I can say. But let's move on to their early fixtures. The first two ones are rough. We do have the Texas Derby to start off with against Dallas Fuel. I would expect Houston Outlaws to lose that. Dallas Fuel do have a lot more quality than the Houston Outlaws in their roster. Although Houston Outlaws, this is the Texas Derby, they can make it very close. There'll be a lot of passion running through that match, and then they have to go straight after that into the San Francisco Shock, which is, that's a rough start. That's a rough start. They should lose to the Shock, and I would have thought they would lose to the Shock quite heavily. But this is when things change for the Outlaws. The next four fixtures, they should start to turn up. So in the third fixture, they have Paris Eternal. This is the sort of match they have to win. But I worry that the Paris Eternal could make it close. I worry the Paris Eternal could make it nail-bitingly close for the Outlaws. And then in the fourth match, they have London. Again, another match they need to win if they want to be above those teams. If they want to get out of that 16th place rut they've been in for 2 seasons, then they need to start winning these matches. And it'll be interesting to see if they can do that. Then they have the Atlanta Reign in their 5th match of the season. Again, a winnable match for the Houston Outlaws, but we still have question marks on over whether they will win it or not. And this is the question. We can't just say cleanly that, yes, Houston Outlaws will win that match. I can't say, even for the Paris Eternal, and people may not like that, but in these first 6 matches of the season, there's 6 matches against Florida Mayhem, which is not going to be easy. In these first 6 matches of the season, I can't nail down any single match which I can definitely, hand on heart, say Houston Outlaws will win. I cannot do it for any of them. And that worries me. That worries me a lot for Houston. I think Houston had the potential to be a very good team here, but there's a lot of question marks. A lot of question marks. They could prove a lot of these question marks wrong, and they could go into this season, be darn good, go and win against Paris, London, and Atlanta. If they're going 3-3 in their first 6 matches, that's a very good outcome for the Houston Outlaws, considering you'd have lost to Florida, San Francisco Shock, and Dallas Fuel. 3 teams that could be in the top 5 at the end of the season. Could be. So that would be a very good outcome for the Houston Outlaws. But there's also the outcome where they could be 0-6. That would be traumatic for this Outlaws side, to be 0-6 after 6 fixtures. When you've played Paris, London, and Atlanta. That would be really, really bad. So it will be a very interesting start to the season for the Houston Outlaws. It's going to be... yeah. We also could take into account that this is a Houston Outlaws in transition, and they may find some very good parts this season, and next season add to that to create a roster that could actually be very good. So there is always that possibility, but at the moment we're just looking at a lot of questions for Houston Outlaws right now, and that's the problem in my opinion. But that will seal it up for the Houston Outlaws. It's been a bit of a lengthy one, this one actually. Next up, we move over to Europe for the first time. London Spitfire will be our next one for number 9. And London, for the first time, is European. For the first time, they are taking a leaf out of the British Hurricanes book, the dominant team from EU contenders. And yeah, that's going to be an interesting one. And London are again a team that could cause a few upsets. They may not be one of the best teams in this league, but yeah, they could cause some upsets. And then after that, we go into the LA doubleheader, which is going to be super interesting because you've got the Gladiators that are really cool, and then you've got the other thing, which, yeah, let's not get into that. That's for a few videos' time. Memes are plenty. Anyway, I will be leaving it here for this one. All the socials are linked in the video description below for Illusion and myself as per usual. But thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you'd like to give a like, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you in the next video. See you then.